December 7th, 1941. The Pacific is a vast black mirror. The horizon is invisible, swallowed by darkness, the air cool enough to sting the face. On the deck of the USS Enterprise, red lights glow like embers, bathing men in shadows as they work in silence. It is 2:15 a.m. Engines cough to life, propellers stir the salty night, and mechanics shout over the rising growl of aircraft being armed for patrol. The crew does not know it yet, but as they move through their routines, tightening bolts, fueling, planes adjusting straps, the world has already changed. Back in Hawaii just hours earlier, history has been set on fire. At Pearl Harbor, the day began with calm waters and routine drills. Then, without warning, the sky screamed. Japanese aircraft tore out of the clouds, their engines howling as bombs rained down on battleships still tied at anchor. In minutes, the pride of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, the battleships Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and more, were reduced to infernos. Oil slicks burned across the harbor, sailors were trapped below decks, and columns of smoke clawed thousands of feet into the sky. By the time the attack ended, the U.S. Navy's backbone was broken. Battleships that had taken decades to build were destroyed in a single morning. In Washington, shock set in. Across America, rage began to burn. But in the chaos, one fact became clear. The future of the Navy now rested on its carriers, and only 3 remained in the Pacific. At that moment, Enterprise, by sheer chance, was at sea, spared from the carnage. She had been ferrying marine fighters to Wake Island, far from Oahu. By missing the destruction, she had unknowingly become the most important ship in the Pacific. On the bridge, Captain George D. Murray stands in the dim glow of the instruments, his hand resting lightly on the cold railing. He is a man trained for discipline, not emotion, but even he can feel it, the sense that something unseen, something massive, is shifting just beyond the horizon. A message crackles through the radio. Room. Static. Broken words. Then a chilling confirmation. Air raid on Pearl Harbor. This is no drill. The words land heavier than shellfire. For a moment, silence grips the ship. Then, in a wave, the reality crashes over the crew. Men freeze where they stand. Mechanics drop their tools. Pilots rush to ready rooms, their hearts pounding faster than their engines. In one brutal instant, the world has shifted. The United States is at war. Enterprise had not been at Pearl to burn with the others. She had not been hit, not scarred, not trapped in the harbor's narrow channels. She was out here, free, alive, and now she carried something no other American ship could: hope. When Enterprise finally sailed back into Pearl Harbor days later, the crew lined the rails. They stared in stunned silence at what remained of their navy. The great battleships, once thought invincible, lay wrecked and smoldering. The Arizona still bled fire and oil, its dead entombed below the surface. Men on Enterprise could smell the harbor before they saw it: burned paint, scorched steel, crude oil, thick on the waves. It was not just destruction, it was a warning. The age of battleships was over. From now on, the war would be fought and won by carriers, and USS Enterprise stood at the center of that future. Even before the shock of Pearl could settle, Enterprise was ordered to sea. Her pilots scrambled into their cockpits, their eyes still burning from grief and fury. Their mission was clear: find the enemy, strike back. Patrols scoured the Pacific, hunting for the Japanese strike force. In the skies above Oahu, Enterprise's aircraft clashed with retreating Japanese planes. For many pilots, it was their first taste of real combat. The encounters were chaotic, brutal, Sun glare blinded them, tracer fire stitched across the sky, engines screamed as planes spiraled into the sea. Some never came back. Names were erased from the chalkboards in ready rooms. For the survivors, the message was written in blood. This would not be an easy war. In the weeks after Pearl Harbor, America was reeling. The Philippines were falling. Wake Island was under siege. Across the Pacific, the Japanese Empire expanded with terrifying speed. The once proud US Navy seemed broken. But through it all, one ship kept moving. Her silhouette, a defiant shadow against the horizon. Enterprise. She was not the biggest, she was not the newest, but she was alive when the others were dead, and, in that fragile, uncertain moment, that was enough to make her the most important ship in the world. Her crew did not know it yet, but they were about to sail into history. They would fight at Midway, Guadalcanal, the Solomons, the Philippine Sea, Leyte Gulf, and Okinawa. They would face bombers, torpedoes, kamikazes, and near destruction. Time and again, they would be declared sunk. Time and again, they would return, and in doing so, they would help decide the fate of an ocean, and perhaps the fate of the war itself. As the sun set on December 7th, the Pacific was quiet again, but the silence was deceptive, heavy, waiting to be broken. Somewhere out there, the Japanese fleet was already preparing its next move. Somewhere, new battles were already written in the currents and the clouds. On the deck of Enterprise, sailors stared into the horizon and asked themselves the same question we now ask in hindsight. Could one ship, outnumbered, outgunned, hunted, across thousands of miles of ocean, survive long enough to carry the weight of a nation's revenge? The answer would shape history. The answer would decide the Pacific. May 12, 1938. Newport News Shipyard. A grey hull slides down the ways, steel shrieking against wood as she touches water for the first time. Workers cheer, their hands raw from months of riveting and welding. Painted across her stern, in bold letters, is a name that seems both ordinary and prophetic. USS Enterprise. At that moment, she is just another carrier in a growing fleet. But for the men who step aboard her decks for the first time, she already feels different. Her lines are sleek, her engines hum with restrained power, her flight deck stretches out like a promise. One sailor whispers, almost to himself, "She feels fast, even tied to the pier." Summer, 1938. The Atlantic wind bites sharp as Enterprise surges into open water on her shakedown cruise. Pilots line up on her deck, aircraft gleaming in the sun, ready to test the new warship's heart. A signalman raises his wand. A hand chops through the air. Engines roar. One by one, planes leap from the deck, wheels skimming the waves before climbing skyward. The crew watches, half pride, half terror. For them, this is no longer blueprints or speculation. This is flight, and risk and steel. In the hangars below, mechanics learn the new language of the carrier. Oil-slicked overalls, hands blackened with grease, the smell of hot engines. They listen to the ship, memorize her quirks, the way the catapults hiss with steam, the tone of the arresting wires as they sing under strain. Every sound is a lesson, every vibration a warning. On the bridge, young officers scribble notes in logbooks recording how the ship answers the sea. She does not sway delicately like a cruiser. She does not lumber like a battleship. She drives forward with authority, each wave answered not with hesitation, but with certainty. By 1940, Enterprise has crossed into the Pacific. The ocean stretches endlessly, blue and unforgiving. Fleet exercises begin, mock battles sprawling across hundreds of miles. In ready rooms, pilots argue over tactics, coffee cooling in forgotten cups. Dive from the sun always. Force them into the glare. Another shakes his head. No, you roll out low and come from the sea. Arguments end not with words, but with practice. In the sky, they test theories with their lives, each maneuver judged by the laws of gravity and speed. On deck, 19-year-old ordnancemen strip bombs, reload them, strip them again until their fingers blister and nails split. They are chasing seconds they cannot yet prove will matter. But they know deep down that one day those seconds will mean the difference between victory and annihilation. At night, the drills change. The ship glows faintly red as crews practice under blackout conditions. A signalman waves glowing wands, writing sentences of light against the dark. Pilots try landing on a strip of wood barely longer than a city block, guided by nothing more than instinct and trust. Some skid across the deck, some miss entirely and circle again. Every landing is a battle between skill and fear. Enterprise is learning and teaching the future of naval warfare. The carrier has become a second home for thousands of men. They know her sounds, the rumble of engines at cruising speed, the clang of watertight doors, the shrill whistles of flight deck crews signaling landings. Her corridors smell of sweat, fuel, and salt. In Hawaii, liberty feels like paradise. Pineapple, music, and laughter fill nights ashore. But the ocean whispers a different truth. Merchant ships vanish without a trace. Radio transmissions end mid-word. Somewhere out there, Japan is moving, silent and patient. Orders arrive with words like precaution and deterrent. The crew uses different words in whispers. When, not if. Young pilots pin photographs of wives or sweethearts inside lockers. Mechanics write letters by dim light, the ink shaking as the ship rolls gently beneath them. Many end the same way. All is well. See you soon. But no one feels certain anymore. Autumn 1941. The tempo quickens. Enterprise ferries aircraft to distant outposts, Wake, Midway, dots on the map that will soon become battlefields. Drills grow sharper, every launch is faster, every landing is tighter. Pilots push harder, diving steeper, skimming lower. Gunners practice until they can swap ammunition belts blindfolded. Damage control crews slam watertight doors at the clang of a bell, sealing compartments in seconds. They do not know it yet, but they are rehearsing for survival. On a quiet December night, the Pacific stretches flat and endless. The horizon is a seam of black against darker black. On the bridge, an officer feels the ship's vibration through his boots and wonders, without words, if they are ready. In the Combat Information Center, a radar operator stares at the green glow of a new, mysterious machine. The screen breathes faintly with echoes, storms, waves, sometimes planes. Most of the time, it shows nothing at all. Still, he watches. Enterprise is ready, though no one knows for what. What is a ship before history finds her? She is a collection of habits. She is men turning drills into reflex, reflex into instinct, instinct into survival. She is steel forged into routine, planes launched, planes recovered, meals eaten in silence, letters written in hope. Enterprise has become all of that. She has become reflex, readiness, reach. And somewhere just beyond the curve of the world, a morning is loading itself with smoke. In days, the age of battleships will burn in Pearl Harbor. In days, Enterprise will find herself not just a ship in the Pacific, but the Pacific's last hope. December 7th, 1941. Dawn creeps across the Pacific, slow and indifferent. On board USS Enterprise, the day begins like any other. The carrier is far from Hawaii, ferrying marine fighters toward Wake Island. Engines warm on the deck. The smell of coffee mingles with salt and oil. Pilots banter in ready rooms, laughing at the same old jokes, none of them knowing how quickly laughter can turn to silence. At 0900 hours, a radio operator bends closer to his set. Static spits in his ears, then a voice, urgent and clipped. "Air! Raid on Pearl Harbor! This is no drill!" The words freeze the room. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then it breaks. Men shout. Officers storm toward the bridge. Runners sprint through passageways, the alarm spreading like fire. Within minutes, the ship is alive with motion. Pilots suiting up, gunners racing to stations, mechanics slamming crates of ammunition open with their fists. Captain George D. Murray grips the bridge railing, his knuckles white. For months, the Navy has trained for a war everyone hoped wouldn't come. In a single sentence, that war has arrived. Pearl Harbor is hundreds of miles away. Enterprise cannot stop what is already happening. The reports that flood the radio are chaos. Arizona exploding in a fireball, Oklahoma capsizing, West Virginia sinking in a plume of smoke. Battleships, the pride of the fleet, are being torn apart in minutes. On Enterprise's deck, sailors stare toward the horizon, fists clenched, powerless. They want to be there, to fight, to stop it. Instead, all they can do is listen to the litany of disaster pouring through the airwaves. By the time Enterprise steams back toward Oahu, the harbor is still burning. Sailors crowd the rails, eyes wide, mouths shut. They see hulks listing in, shallow water, smoke coiling into the sky, oil spreading like a black sea inside the harbor itself. The smell hits hardest, burned paint, scorched steel, fuel choking the air. For many it feels like standing at a funeral where the dead number in the thousands. But in that destruction, one truth emerges: the battleship era has ended. The age of the carrier has begun. Enterprise does not linger. Orders drive her back to sea almost immediately. The mission: find the enemy. Strike back. Her squadrons are scattered across the Pacific, already airborne on routine patrols. Some stumble headlong into Japanese planes retreating from the Oahu attack. The encounters are sudden and brutal. A young ensign flying a Wildcat sights a Zero too late, tracers stitch across his wing, fuel ignites, and his aircraft becomes a comet of fire plunging into the sea. Another pilot, barely out of training, lines up a bomber and squeezes his trigger until the guns jam, watching. The enemy spiral down in black smoke. In the ready room, chalkboards turn names into absences. Helmets rest in empty chairs. The lesson is immediate. This war will not be fought in drills. It will be written in blood. Enterprise's gunners soon get their own baptism. Enemy bombers, prowling for American carriers, streak out of cloud cover. Klaxons howl. "General quarters, all hands!" The ship shakes as her anti-aircraft batteries thunder skyward. The air fills with black bursts, shrapnel slicing through the clouds. A Japanese plane dives low, bullets raking Enterprise's deck. But gunners find their mark. Flames erupt from the wing, and the bomber slams into the ocean in a spray of fire and water. The crew feels the jolt in their bones. The first kill. Proof that they can fight back. On the hangar deck, mechanics work by instinct. sweat pouring down their faces as they reload planes almost faster than pilots can land. A 19-year-old ordnance man whispers a prayer each time he slams another bomb into its cradle. He doesn't think about politics, strategy, or the grand sweep of war. He thinks about the pilot in the cockpit waiting on him. If he can save 30 seconds, maybe that pilot comes home alive. In the engine rooms, firemen shovel furiously, feeding the boilers, driving Enterprise forward at flank speed. The air is suffocating, the heat blistering, but none of them falter. Above them, the ship moves like a living thing, steel and sweat and heartbeat fused together. On the bridge, Captain Murray listens to fragmentary reports. No one knows yet how many ships are gone, how many men lost, but the pattern is clear. America's battleships are wrecks. The carriers, Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, are all that stand between Japan and total dominance of the Pacific. Indeed, the days after the attack, Enterprise feels the weight of an entire nation. She is no longer just a ship. She is a symbol of what remains. Every sailor aboard knows it. They whisper it in mess lines. They feel it in their bones each time they launch planes into hostile skies. If Enterprise dies, hope dies with her. The Pacific has become a hunting ground. Japanese submarines prowl unseen. Enemy aircraft stalk the waves. At night, lookouts scan the dark horizon with binoculars. Nerves raw, knowing a single silhouette could mean death. And yet Enterprise presses on, scarred, unbroken, hunted, but alive. December 1941 closes with the Pacific in flames. The Philippines are collapsing. Wake Island is besieged. Guam has fallen. The Japanese Empire seems unstoppable, advancing like a tide, but in that ocean of defeat, one ship keeps sailing. Forward. Enterprise. She has taken her first blows, lost her first men, tasted her first fire, and she has endured. Her crew does not yet know the battles ahead: Midway, Guadalcanal, Santa Cruz, Leyte Gulf. They cannot imagine the bombs, the torpedoes, the kamikazes yet to come. But they know this: America is at war, and Enterprise is at the heart of it. The question is no longer if she will fight. The question is how long she can survive, because in the ashes of Pearl Harbor, one carrier stands as America's answer to tragedy, scarred, defiant, and ready to carry the war across the Pacific. January 1942. The Pacific is a Japanese lake. Fortress after fortress has fallen. Hong Kong, the Philippines, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies. Japan's empire stretches across thousands of miles, and every day their flag rises over new conquests. Allied headlines are grim: defeat, retreat, surrender. But somewhere out in that vast hostile ocean, a single American carrier is still at large. Her name whispers through both fleets now: Enterprise. She cannot fight toe-to-toe with Japan's growing armada. She cannot hold ground. What she can do is strike, fast, sudden. Hard enough to remind the enemy that America is not finished. January 31st, 1942. Before dawn, Enterprise prowls near the Marshall and Gilbert Islands, territory the Japanese consider secure. On her deck, crews whisper under red lights, fueling and arming bombers. The first aircraft claw skyward, engines shattering the pre-dawn silence. Hours later, explosions ripple across Kwajalein, Votja, and Tarawa. Fuel tanks erupt in sheets of flame. Aircraft burn on the ground. Japanese anti-aircraft fire lashes back, black blossoms clawing at the sky, but Enterprise's flyers dive again and again, ignoring tracers snapping past their canopies. Then comes the enemy's reply. Bombers roar out of the clouds hunting the carrier. Klaxons wail across Enterprise. Gunners man their posts, sweat freezing on their brows. A Japanese plane breaks through and dives straight for the ship, cannon fire flashing. For an instant, it seems Enterprise's luck has ended, until a wall of tracers rips it apart, the wreck slamming into the sea just short of the deck. It is Enterprise's first taste of being prey. She survives, and the lesson is burned in two. Her steel. Carriers live only as long as they can evade the crosshairs. February to March 1942. Enterprise sails like a ghost across the Pacific. 1 week, she's striking Wake Island, bombing supply dumps and airfields. The next, she slashes at Marcus Island, far closer to Japan than her enemies believe possible. Each raid is modest. Fuel depots destroyed, patrol planes shattered on runways, supply dumps left in flames. Strategically, they do not halt Japan's advance, but psychologically they matter far more. For the Japanese, the message is chilling. No island is safe. For Americans back home, reeling from Pearl Harbor, the headlines mean something equally powerful. Resistance has begun. Enterprise has become what her crew call her with pride. A raider, a phantom, a ghost. April 1942. Enterprise receives her strangest orders yet. She is to escort another carrier, Hornet, on a mission cloaked in secrecy. When her crew crowds the rail to look, they burst into laughter and disbelief. Sitting awkwardly on Hornet's flight deck are not naval fighters or bombers, but bulky, twin-engine B-25 Mitchell bombers. Army aircraft, never before launched from a carrier. The plan is audacious: fly them off the deck, strike Tokyo itself, and land in China. Enterprise will not launch them, but she will guard them. On April 18th, with seas running high, the mission begins. At dawn, 16 B-25s rumble forward, one by one, devouring every inch of Hornet's deck before leaping into the grey sky. Enterprise's sailors cheer from their rails, fists pumping as the bombers vanish into the east. Hours later, the unimaginable happens. Explosions rock Tokyo, Yokohama, and Nagoya. Bombs ripple across the Japanese homeland. Damage is limited, but the symbolism is colossal. For the first time, Japan feels vulnerable. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Americans feel hope. Enterprise has guarded the mission that proved a simple truth: the Pacific is not Japan's to keep. In these first months, Enterprise fights not for decisive victory, but for endurance. Every sortie, every raid is a message to the enemy, to allies, to the men themselves: we are still here. Her decks grow scarred from endless landings. Mechanics collapse into hammocks beside the very engines they've just rebuilt. Pilots return pale, silent, their eyes bloodshot from hours of combat. A handful of names are already carved into memory, men who took off and never came back. But Enterprise sails on. She does not falter. She does not fall. By the spring of 1942, Enterprise has struck across the Pacific like a shadow. She is no longer just a ship. She is a rumor, a presence, a warning. To the Japanese, she is a hunter who will not be cornered. To Americans, she is proof that the fight is not lost. No one aboard knows what lies ahead, only that the war is growing and the storm will break again soon. When it does, Enterprise will be waiting. June 4th, 1942, the Pacific is deceptively calm. The sea lies flat under a blue sky, the horizon wide and endless. But aboard USS Enterprise, tension coils like a spring. For days, she has steamed east of a small coral atoll called Midway, waiting for an enemy everyone knows is coming. 4 Japanese carriers, the same giants that unleashed hell on Pearl Harbor, are approaching with overwhelming force. Their mission: lure out and destroy what remains of America's fleet. On paper, it is a trap the US cannot possibly escape. But American cryptographers working in dark rooms thousands of miles away have already broken Japanese codes. Enterprise knows they are coming. This time, the hunters will be the hunted. Before the sun rises, the carrier is a storm of motion. Flight deck crews in colored shirts rush across planks slick with dew. Ordnancemen slam bombs into cradles. Mechanics coax temperamental engines into life. Pilots, faces pale and drawn, strap themselves into cockpits with trembling hands. The order comes.
Launch! Duct engines roar, one after another, shaking the ship down to her keel. The first planes thunder down the deck and leap into the sky. More follow, climbing into the dawn. From below, sailors watch until they vanish into specks against the
clouds, each one carrying not just bombs but the weight of a nation desperate for revenge. Hours pass. On the horizon, the sea is empty, but in the sky above, history is assembling. At last, a gap in the clouds opens. Below, glittering in the sun, lie 4 Japanese carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Their decks are alive with motion, planes refueling, rearming, being spotted for another strike. Fuel hoses snake across planks, bombs sit exposed, waiting for wings. It is the most vulnerable moment any carrier can face. The American dive bombers of Enterprise, the rugged SBD Dauntlesses, circle high above, unseen. Pilots glance at each other across their canopies. They know what this means. A chance like this comes once in a lifetime, if ever. The leader tips his nose. His wingmen follow. The sky erupts with the scream of near-vertical dives. Anti-aircraft fire claws upward, black bursts ripping the air. The Dauntlesses plummet straight through, cockpits rattling, pilots gritting teeth as the ocean spins crazily in their windshields. At 20,000 feet, it feels like falling into the mouth of hell. One by one, they release. Bombs whistle downward, vanishing into the chaos below. Seconds later, the ocean erupts in fire. Kaga is the first. A single bomb punches through her flight deck and into her hangar, where planes sit armed and fueled. The explosion sets off a chain reaction that rips through the ship, fireballs boiling out of every opening. Within minutes, she is an inferno. Akagi follows, a bomb slamming through her deck and igniting aviation fuel. Flames roar skyward, smoke curling like black banners. Soryu is struck next, 3 bombs in rapid succession. Her deck buckles, men flung into the sea as secondary explosions shatter her hull. Enterprise's pilots pull out of their dives, the shockwaves hammering their planes, and glance back at the scene below. In moments, 3 of Japan's mighty carriers, the same ones that devastated Pearl Harbor, are crippled beyond hope. But the battle is not over. The last Japanese carrier, Hiryu, launches a desperate counterattack. Her bombers find the USS Yorktown, striking her with brutal precision. Explosions tear open her decks, fires rage, and she lists heavily. For a moment, it seems the price of victory will be unbearable. But Enterprise launches another wave. Her Dauntlesses find Hiryu later that afternoon, and once again they dive. Bombs slam into her deck, fire ripping through her hangars. By nightfall, she too is burning wreckage. In a single day, 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, lie destroyed. When Enterprise's air groups return, the decks are filled with exhausted men, some trembling, others too numb to speak. Mechanics pull pilots from cockpits streaked with sweat and blood. Some planes limp back with holes stitched across their wings, fuel leaking, engines coughing. Others never return at all. The sea around Midway is littered with burning aircraft, parachutes drifting into waves, men clinging to rafts. Victory has come at a cost, and those who survived will carry the faces of the lost long after the smoke clears. But the strategic truth is undeniable. The Japanese Navy has lost its striking arm in a single day. The aura of invincibility that carried them across the Pacific is gone. For Enterprise, Midway is more than a battle. It is the moment she becomes legend. Her decks launched the squadrons that crippled an empire. Her crew turned the tide of the war. Historians will debate for decades whether Midway saved the Pacific, but for the men on Enterprise there is no debate. On June 4th, 1942, the course of history shifted, and they were the ones who made it happen. As night falls over the Pacific, Enterprise sails on, her decks scarred, her crew exhausted, her hangars still echoing with the sounds of battle. She has survived again, and more than that, she has carried a nation from despair into hope. The war is far from over. Japan will fight savagely in the months to come, but the tide has turned, and at its center, as always, stands the carrier they cannot kill, USS Enterprise. August 1942. The Solomon Islands are steaming jungles heavy with rain and disease. Mosquitoes rise in clouds and the nights smell of mud, sweat, and decay. But beneath all of that lies something worth more than the island itself. An airfield carved into the earth by Japanese engineers. If finished, it would project power deep into the Pacific, cutting off the lifeline between America and Australia. The island's name is Guadalcanal. On August 7, U.S. Marines wade ashore, rifles held high, pushing through the surf into a wall of jungle. They seize the half-built airstrip and rename it Henderson Field. But to hold it, they will need help from the sea. And that help comes from the battered American carrier force, at the center of it all, Enterprise. By mid-1942, America's carrier fleet is a shadow of what it once hoped to be. Lexington is gone. Yorktown lies at the bottom near Midway. Wasp is torpedoed and sinking. Hornet will soon join them. That leaves Enterprise, often for weeks at a time, the only operational U.S. carrier in the entire Pacific. It means one thing: if she falls, the entire campaign falls with her. August 24, 1942, Enterprise prowls east of Guadalcanal, her decks vibrating with tension. Radar operators pick up incoming blips, Japanese bombers diving in fast, the sky fills with engines, dive bombers shriek down through the clouds, their silhouettes black against the sun. Alarm klaxons wail. Gunners open up, tracers slicing upward in white-hot arcs. Wildcats claw to intercept, but the enemy breaks through. Explosions slam into Enterprise's deck. One bomb rips into her flight deck, blasting men into the air. Another detonates near her aft elevator, shattering steel. Fire roars through compartments. Smoke boils into the sky. Below deck, chaos erupts. Damage control crews stumble through flame and choking haze. Fire hoses scream to life, men swing axes, cutting through twisted steel to reach trapped shipmates. Pumps roar as flooding threatens to spread. The air is thick with the stink of burning paint and cordite. For a moment, it seems the Pacific's most important ship has met her end, but Enterprise refuses to die. Hour by hour, her crew claws her back from the edge. Fires are drowned. Flooding is sealed. By nightfall, she is bruised, bleeding but afloat. she limps away under her own power, alive to fight another day. The Japanese report her sunk. Newspapers in Tokyo celebrate her destruction, but within weeks she is back at sea, scarred, patched, her flight deck lined with aircraft once more. And so the legend begins. The Japanese give her a name: the Grey Ghost. October 1942. The Japanese counterattack with everything they have. The Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands rages across hundreds of miles. Again, Enterprise finds herself the prime target. Bombs crash into her deck, tearing holes through steel. Men are hurled from their posts, screams echoing through the smoke. At one point, abandoned ship orders are considered, but once again, the crew fights like men possessed. They beat back the fires. They patch ruptures with whatever steel and timber they can scavenge. Pilots launch from half-ruined decks to strike back at the enemy. By battle's end, Hornet is lost, but Enterprise still sails, the last American carrier left in the Pacific. For months, she bears the burden of an entire ocean. Her aircraft duel Japanese Zeros over jungle skies, strafing Henderson Field to keep it alive. Torpedo bombers strike enemy convoys attempting to reinforce Guadalcanal. Every sortie is a gamble, every landing feels like cheating death. On her decks, young men become old overnight. Mechanics patch bullet-riddled planes until their hands bleed. Pilots return pale and silent, the empty chairs in ready rooms telling the story no one says aloud. Marines on Guadalcanal look skyward, with relief whenever Enterprise's fighters appear, the difference between survival and annihilation. By November, the tide begins to shift. Japan, battered and exhausted, withdraws its forces from Guadalcanal. After 6 months of relentless fighting on jungle trails, in the waters of Iron Bottom Sound, and in the skies above, America holds the island. It is the first true offensive victory of the Pacific War. And at its heart, always there, always somehow alive, was USS Enterprise. She has been bombed. She has been torpedoed. She has been declared sunk more than once. Yet every time the Grey Ghost rises again, patched and bruised, her decks once more alive with aircraft. For the Japanese, she is a nightmare, an enemy that cannot be killed. For Americans, she is a talisman, the ship that refuses to die. In the crucible of Guadalcanal, USS Enterprise becomes more than a carrier. She becomes the embodiment of endurance itself, and the war is only halfway done. October 1942. The waters north of the Solomon Islands boil with storm clouds and tension. The campaign for Guadalcanal is at its breaking point. U.S. Marines cling to Henderson Field, but Japan is determined to smash them with one decisive blow. To do it, they assemble a powerful fleet, 4 carriers bristling with aircraft. Against them, the United States can muster only 2, the brand-new USS Hornet and the battered veteran USS Enterprise. October 26th. At dawn, the Pacific is grey and flat, the kind of deceptive calm that makes men uneasy. On Enterprise's deck, mechanics swarm over bombers and fighters, wrenching bolts and topping off fuel lines. Pilots strap in with jaws tight, eyes narrowed. The word comes down: enemy carriers spotted. Engines roar. Planes hurtle down the deck, wheels lifting into heavy air. Squadrons streak toward distant silhouettes, searching for Japan's fleet. But as Enterprise launches her strike, the Japanese launch theirs. Across hundreds of miles of ocean, both sides hurl steel and fire into the sky at the same time. Hours later, alarms scream, radar screens bloom with contacts, dozens of enemy planes. Inbound, torpedo bombers low, dive bombers high, Zeros circling like sharks. Enterprise braces for her trial. The first wave dives out of the sun, bombs whistle down, one detonates just off her bow, showering her deck in shrapnel, another slams directly into her flight deck. The ship shudders, metal shrieking, men flung from their posts, fire erupts across the hangar, smoke boils upward in choking columns. Torpedo planes skim in low. Anti-aircraft gunners fire until their barrels glow red, tracers stitching the sea, detonating bombers mid-run. But some get through. A torpedo explodes against her hull, flooding compartments, throwing sailors to the deck. For long minutes, Enterprise is hell itself. Explosions echo through steel. Fire crews stagger through smoke with hoses and axes, fighting to hold the line. Damage control parties swing watertight doors closed, sometimes trapping comrades on the wrong side. The ship lists, groans, but keeps moving. At one point, officers prepare to give the unthinkable order, abandon ship, but the crew refuses. Inch by inch, bucket by bucket, hose by hose, they claw Enterprise back from death. By nightfall she is scarred, burning, but afloat. The price is heavy. Hornet, her sister in battle, is hammered by Japanese strikes. Flames consume her, and torpedoes finish what bombs began. By the end of the day, Hornet is gone, sliding beneath the Pacific. That leaves only one American carrier still fighting. In the Pacific, only one ship between the Marines on Guadalcanal and total isolation. Only one carrier left to carry the hopes of an entire ocean. The USS Enterprise. The Japanese claim her sunk. Radio broadcasts boast of victory. Newspapers print her obituary. But within weeks, patched and limping, Enterprise sails back into battle. Her flight deck bears scars filled with fresh steel plates, her hull still dented, her hangars patched with timber, but she flies aircraft again, she launches strikes again, she lives again. The Japanese give her a name whispered with frustration and disbelief, the Grey Ghost. No matter how many times they try to kill her, she always returns. For months into late 1942, Enterprise prowls the Solomons as the only functioning American carrier. Her aircraft fight day after day, dueling Zeros, strafing airfields, bombing supply convoys. Pilots return pale, exhausted, sometimes not at all. Empty bunks multiply in the ready rooms. Mechanics patch bullet holes with sheet metal, sometimes painting over the patches with whatever grey they can find. Marines on Guadalcanal look skyward whenever Enterprise's Wildcats appear overhead. To them, she is more than a ship. She is salvation. But the strain is immense. Every bomb strike, every near miss, every missing pilot weighs heavier on her crew. They know if the Ghost falls, the Pacific could fall with her. By early 1943, reinforcements finally begin to arrive. New Essex-class carriers, fresh from American shipyards, swell the Pacific Fleet. At last, Enterprise is no longer alone. In May, she limps back to Pearl Harbor for an overhaul. Welders strip burned steel from her decks, replacing it with new plating. Her island bristles with upgraded radar. Anti-aircraft batteries multiply, lining her rails with fresh teeth. When she emerges months later, she is stronger, faster, deadlier. But her scars remain, not just in steel, but in memory. Her crew has lived through the darkest hours of the Pacific War. They have seen Hornet vanish, Yorktown sink, Lexington explode, Wasp burn. Through it all, Enterprise endured. She is no longer just another carrier. She is the carrier, the veteran, the survivor, the ghost that kept the war alive when defeat seemed inevitable. By the end of 1943, the tide has begun to shift. America is no longer fighting for survival. It is building toward victory. But that Victory would never have been possible without the ship that stood alone in the storm. For the men who served on her, Enterprise is not just steel and rivets. She is alive, a ship with a soul carried forward by the will of the thousands who bled, fought, and refused to let her die. The Pacific is turning. New giants join the fight, but none will ever carry the weight that the Grey Ghost bore alone in those dark months. February 1944. The Pacific has changed. The days of one battered carrier holding the line are over. Back home, American shipyards are running like factories of destiny, rolling Essex-class carriers off the slips in a rhythm as steady as a metronome. What was once desperation has become overwhelming force, and standing proudly among this new steel armada is the veteran, the ship that refused to die, USS Enterprise. For years, the Japanese base at Truk Lagoon has been whispered about like
a fortress of legend.
They call it the Gibraltar of the Pacific, a lagoon ringed with islands, bristling with airfields, anchored by dozens of warships. It is the beating heart of Japanese operations in the Central Pacific. On February 17th, Enterprise joins the fleet steaming toward it. Dawn breaks, the sea flat and endless, and the decks come alive. Crews heave bombs into place, pilots check straps, goggles and nerves. Engines thunder to life one after another, till the flight deck shakes beneath their feet. Then launch. From Enterprise's deck, wave after wave of Dauntlesses, Avengers and Hellcats roar into the sky. They cross the horizon and dive into Truk with fury. Explosions ripple across the lagoon. Fuel depots erupt into fireballs so massive they paint the clouds black. Japanese ships, destroyers, cruisers, tankers are torn apart at anchor. Planes scramble from runways only to be cut down by waiting Hellcats. By day's end, Truk, once thought impregnable, lies in ruins, its harbours choked with smoke and wreckage for Enterprise's crew. The sight is surreal. 2 years earlier, they
fought just to survive at Guadalcanal.
Now they are smashing Japan's strongest base into rubble. The message is clear. Japan's empire is shrinking, and Enterprise is no longer just a survivor. She is a hunter. Spring of 1944. The US sets its sights on the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, Guam. To the men on Enterprise's deck, the names sound like distant dots on a chart, but to strategists in Washington, they are the keys to victory. From these islands, America's new long-range B-29 superfortresses can reach Tokyo itself. Capture them, and the war can be brought to Japan's doorstep. The Japanese know this. They cannot allow the Marianas to fall, and so they prepare to throw everything they have left into one last gamble. June 19, 1944. Radar screens aboard Enterprise flicker with blips, dozens at first, then hundreds. Japanese aircraft are inbound in wave after wave, bombers, torpedo planes, fighters. The largest carrier air attack Japan has ever launched. On Enterprise's deck, Hellcat fighters line up, their engines screaming. Pilots strap in, some veterans of Midway and Guadalcanal, others new to combat but trained in endless drills. The order comes, launch all fighters. The catapults thunder, planes leap into the sky. Within minutes, the air above the fleet is a seething storm of contrails, tracers, and fire. The Japanese planes come in ragged formations, pilots barely trained, flying machines inferior to the Hellcats now tearing through them. American aviators, many with years of experience, dive in with precision. tracer fire stitches across the sky. 10 bursts into flame, spiraling down in a black trail of smoke. A Judy dive bomber explodes mid-air, fragments scattering like burning confetti. Torpedo planes never even make it within sight of the carriers. They are shredded miles out. From Enterprise's bridge, sailors watch with disbelief. The sky looks less like a battle than a shooting gallery. Pilots radio back in half-laughing chaos. Splash 1, splash 2, another going down in flames. By nightfall, the scale of the slaughter is undeniable. More than 300 Japanese aircraft are destroyed. American losses? Barely a few dozen. The Japanese naval air arm, the same force that brought Pearl Harbor to its knees, is effectively annihilated in a single day. It will be remembered forever as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. For Japan, the loss is catastrophic. Their carriers still float, but their decks are empty. Their veteran pilots are gone, replaced by teenagers with barely 100 hours of flight time. The Empire's air power, once feared across the Pacific, is shattered beyond repair. For Enterprise, the moment is vindication. She has fought through the desperate days, Midway, Guadalcanal, Santa Cruz, when every sortie felt like a last stand. Now she sails in triumph, part of an armada so powerful that victory is no longer a question of if, but when. Among the new Essex-class carriers, Enterprise is almost small, outdated, but her reputation towers above them all. To the men who serve, on her decks, she is not just another warship. She is the Ghost, the ship that carried them through the darkest days and now leads them into the brightest triumphs. The Pacific has turned. The hunter is no longer hunted, and USS Enterprise sails at the very heart of America's unstoppable march toward victory. October 1944. The Philippines. For 3 years, the Pacific has been painted in blood. Now the United States turns to liberate the Philippines, and with it, cut Japan's empire in half. To stop it, the Imperial Navy gathers everything it has left: battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and what remains of its carriers. The result will be the largest naval battle in human history. The Battle of Leyte Gulf. Enterprise launches her aircraft into skies thick with humidity and tension. Their target, a monster of steel, the Japanese super battleship Musashi, sister to the Yamato. She is nearly 70,000 tons of armor and guns, a floating fortress bristling with anti-aircraft fire. Time and again, Enterprise's planes dive on her, dropping bombs, launching torpedoes, hammering her with relentless fury. For hours, Musashi absorbs blow after blow, shrouded in fire and smoke, her crew fighting desperately to keep her afloat. But even steel has limits. By dusk, the sea claims her, dragging more than 1,000 men down with her. For the Americans, it is proof that no ship, not even the largest ever built, can withstand the combined weight of carrier power. Leyte Gulf is not one battle, but 4, raging across hundreds of miles. In Surigao Strait, American battleships ambush Japan's fleet at night, crossing their T in a devastating broadside. Off Samar, a handful of tiny American escort carriers and destroyers, Taffy 3, fight like lions against a much larger Japanese force, holding them off at impossible odds. And at Cape Engano, Enterprise's sisters smash Japan's last carriers, sending them burning to the bottom. By the end of Leyte Gulf, Japan's navy is broken. Its carriers gone, its battleships crippled, its power shattered. But with its fleet dying, Japan turns to something new, something darker. Late 1944, a new word spreads through the fleet: kamikaze, divine wind. young Japanese pilots strapped into bomb-laden aircraft ordered to crash directly into American ships. For carriers, they are a nightmare. No evasive maneuver can always stop them. No anti-aircraft battery can catch them all. Enterprise, veteran of every trial so far, now faces her deadliest yet. In November 1944, a kamikaze slams into Enterprise's flight deck. The impact is brutal. Steel twists, flames roar skyward, men are hurled into the sea. The deck is cratered, planes shredded, wreckage burning. But within hours, the grey ghost is back. Her crew fights the fire, clears the wreckage, and launches aircraft again before the day ends. It becomes a pattern. Kamikaze after kamikaze slams into her. Each time she staggers, each time she rises. February 1945, the island of Iwo Jima
rises from the sea like a fortress, black volcanic sand, rugged caves.
Japanese soldiers dug deep, prepared to die rather than surrender. Enterprise launches relentless airstrikes day after day, supporting the Marines clawing their way up Mount Suribachi. Her Hellcats duel the last of Japan's fighters. Her bombers tear into bunkers and supply dumps. For the men struggling ashore, Enterprise is the shield above them, her planes swooping low over the killing ground. But the cost is staggering, both on the island and at sea. Kamikazes find her again, and each impact tears deeper into her soul. April 1945. Okinawa, the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War. Hundreds of ships crowd the waters, and with them comes the storm. More than 1,500 kamikazes launched against the fleet. Enterprise fights at the center of it. Her gunners fill the sky with tracers, cutting down attackers in blazing arcs. But no defense is perfect. On May 14, 1945, a kamikaze carrying a 500-pound bomb smashes into her deck. The explosion rips a massive hole through steel and wood. Fires rage, killing dozens, crippling her flight operations. For the first time in the war, Enterprise cannot return immediately to battle. She limps home, her wounds too deep, her decks too scarred. The grey ghost has finally been forced to rest, yet by then she has already done more than any other ship. She has fought at Pearl Harbor's aftermath, at Midway, at Guadalcanal, at Santa Cruz, at Truk, in the Marianas, at Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. She has been bombed, torpedoed, struck by kamikazes and survived them all. Her record is unparalleled, her scars unmatched, her legend unbreakable. As she limps back toward Pearl Harbor for repairs, her crew knows the war is almost over. Japan is dying, its skies empty, its seas broken. But if victory belongs to anyone's ship, it belongs to the one that carried the war from its darkest night to its brightest dawn, the Grey Ghost, USS Enterprise. Summer 1945. The Pacific War is reaching its end game. Japan's navy lies shattered at the bottom of the sea. Her air power is gone, her cities burning under relentless waves of B-29 firebombing. But even cornered, Japan refuses to surrender. And so the Grey Ghost still sails, battered and scarred, into her final trial. May 14th, 1945. The waters off Okinawa boil with chaos. Hundreds of kamikazes have hurled themselves at the American fleet, turning the sea into a funeral pyre of smoke
and flame.
Enterprise has already endured hits before, but this time the attack is different. A single Japanese plane dives straight for her flight deck, engines screaming like a banshee. It slams into steel, carrying a 500-pound bomb. The explosion rips through the deck with terrifying force. A crater yawns open, flames tear across the hangar, fuel ignites in a chain of detonations. Sailors are hurled into the air, shrapnel scythes through compartments. Men stagger, bleeding, choking in smoke. On the bridge, officers feel the shock reverberate like the ship's heartbeat has stopped. For a moment, the Grey Ghost herself seems mortal. Damage control teams fight with a desperation born of muscle memory. Hoses roar. Foam smothers fuel fires. Watertight doors slam, sealing compartments where men still fight to hold back the sea. Slowly, agonizingly, Enterprise stabilizes. She is not sinking, but she cannot fight. For the first time in the war, the ship that would not die has been forced out of action. She limps back across the Pacific, first to Pearl Harbor, then to Puget Sound. Welders swarm her decks. Sparks rain like fireflies as crews patch steel, weld plates, and rebuild systems destroyed by fire and blast. For weeks, she lies still, an alien feeling for a ship that has spent 4 years in near-constant combat. To her crew, the silence feels heavier than any battle. They want to return to the fight. But history has other plans. By August, Enterprise is nearly ready to rejoin the fleet. Then the news comes: Hiroshima, Nagasaki. 2 atomic bombs that turned cities into wastelands
of ash and shadow.
And then words no American sailor expected to hear: Japan has surrendered. The war is over. Enterprise will not fire another shot. Victory does not mean rest. America now faces another task: bringing millions of servicemen home from islands and bases scattered across the Pacific. The operation is given a name: Magic Carpet. Enterprise is chosen. Her cavernous hangars, once filled with Hellcats, Avengers, and Dauntlesses, are stripped of weapons and transformed. Cots line every available space. Hammocks swing from steel beams. Instead of bombs and torpedoes, she carries duffel bags, letters, and photographs tucked into the hands of men desperate to see home. From her flight deck, no more squadrons roar into the sky. Instead, Marines and sailors shuffle aboard, weary but alive, carrying scars and stories from places like Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. They collapse onto bunks, onto bare steel, sometimes onto nothing more than a folded jacket. For the first time in years, they sleep without fear of air raids or alarms. To them, Enterprise is no longer just a warship. She is deliverance. A bridge across the ocean, carrying them home. When her Magic Carpet voyages end, the numbers are staggering. Enterprise has fought in almost every major battle of the Pacific: Pearl Harbor's aftermath, the Marshalls, Midway, Guadalcanal, Santa Cruz, Truk, the Marianas, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. She has sunk or helped sink dozens of Japanese warships. Her aircraft have destroyed hundreds of enemy planes. She has endured bomb strikes, torpedo hits, kamikazes, always scarred, never destroyed. For her service, she earns 20 battle stars, more than any other ship of the war. She is awarded the Presidential Unit Citation and the Navy Unit Commendation. Among her sailors, she is remembered simply as the Lucky E, but even legends cannot outpace time. After the war, new carriers, larger, faster, built for the jet age, take the spotlight. Enterprise, tired and battered, is decommissioned in 1947. There are calls to preserve her as a museum, to enshrine the ship that carried the Pacific War. But funding never comes. By 1958, the Grey Ghost is gone, sold for scrap, dismantled piece by piece, and yet her name never dies. a new enterprise rises, CVN-65, the world's first nuclear-powered carrier. And even now, another CVN-80 is under construction, ensuring that the Grey Ghost's legacy sails into the future. For the men who walked her decks, the memory never fades, the roar of engines at dawn, the shudder of bombs striking steel, the smell of oil and salt and fire. They remember the fear, the grief, the victories, and above all, they remember the ship that refused to sink, USS Enterprise. Not just another carrier, but the carrier, the Grey Ghost, the ship that saved the Pacific War. The war was over. By 1947, Enterprise was decommissioned. In 1958, she was gone, sold for scrap, piece by piece. The ship that had carried the Pacific War on her back no longer existed in steel, but her name, her story, her spirit lived on. In 4 years of war, Enterprise had fought in nearly every major battle of the Pacific. Pearl Harbor's aftermath, Midway, Guadalcanal, Santa Cruz, the Marianas, Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. She had been bombed, torpedoed, struck by kamikazes, declared, sunk again and again, and every time she returned. For this, the Japanese called her the Grey Ghost. To her own sailors, she was the Lucky E. To history, she became the most decorated warship of World War II, 20 battle stars. Presidential and Navy unit citations. Hundreds of enemy ships sunk or crippled, thousands of planes destroyed, but beyond medals and records, she carried something greater: hope. Over 30,000 men served aboard Enterprise. For them, she was not just steel and rivets, she was home. A mechanic who knew the sound of a failing engine before gauges admitted it. A radar operator who watched the ghostly green glow of contacts on the screen. A pilot who scribbled one last letter home before launch. A damage control sailor who fought fire with bare hands and prayer. These men, ordinary, frightened, determined, made Enterprise legendary. She was their shield, their refuge, their weapon, their grave. Though CV-6 was lost to the scrapyard, her legacy never ended. In 1961, the U.S. Navy launched a new enterprise, CVN-65, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. She served for over 50 years, from the Cold War through the Gulf Wars, carrying the name into a new age. And now another ship is rising, USS Enterprise, CVN-80, an advanced carrier of the Gerald R. Ford class, being built to sail into the 21st century and beyond. Each new vessel carries not just the name, but the weight of memory, the unbroken chain that began in 1938 with a sleek grey hull sliding into the water at Newport News. The legend of Enterprise grew beyond the sea. The name leapt into popular culture, christening fictional starships that carried humanity's imagination into the stars. Starship Enterprise became a household name, a symbol of exploration, resilience, and survival. From the burning skies of Midway to the black void of science fiction, Enterprise came to mean something more than a ship. It meant endurance. It meant hope. The story of USS Enterprise is not only about battles and victories, it is about survival against impossible odds, about men who fought, repaired, and refused to surrender, about a ship that embodied the will of a nation in its darkest hour. She proved that steel alone does not win wars, people do. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to give in to it. That even when the horizon is filled with smoke and defeat seems certain, one ship, one crew, can tip the balance of history. Today, her timbers are gone, her decks dismantled, but in museums, in naval archives, in the stories of veterans, she sails still. Her name is etched in battle, records in medals, in the memories of old sailors who whisper, "This ship saved us." She saved the war. USS Enterprise was not perfect, she was not invulnerable, but she was always there when Pearl Harbor burned, when Midway turned the tide, when Guadalcanal hung by a thread, when Japan's empire crumbled. And because she endured, history remembers her not just as a ship, but as a symbol, the Grey Ghost, the lucky USS Enterprise, the carrier that saved the Pacific War.